I know there's so much to talk about. Before we jump in, because Jessica and I have been having an ongoing exchange via messaging in the member circles. So we're coming into this with a lot to
Mhm.
talk about, which everyone will benefit from. Before we jump in, I just wanted to welcome everyone, Jessica, first of all, and everyone else who's here. So this is one of our awakening conversations, which we started a few months ago. And the idea for these is to create an informal but open conversation, to create informal but open conversations for members of the community. And so far I think they've all been dialogues with me, which I assumed that was how it was going to start. But I'm hoping that we graduate beyond that, and that any of our members who have a conversation they would like to engage in and can invite another member to be part of a dialoguing team, and can just set this up with Sophie, and we can let all the members know that X topic is going to be discussed with these two people discussing, and anyone's invited to join in the conversation, just like I've been doing, and I will continue to do them. And I have a feeling that Jessica and I will continue to do these periodically until we exhaust the infinite number of things we have to talk about.
So we agree on everything.
Until we agree on everything. And yeah, so I want to encourage all of you to think about the possibility of hosting one of these with another member yourselves. And because I just want us all to be talking more about things that matter and sharing perspectives, which is what Jessica and I are going to do today. So Jessica, first of all, I just want to leave this open for you to say anything you like, or whatever's on your mind.
Sure. Well, I know we decided that we wouldn't have a specific topic, but you did say a little something about maybe touching on, I think you had said sort of what spiritual living looks like, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So I did actually have a starting point that I'd be happy to go with.
Great, please do.
That I think can kind of launch us into probably every topic that we've ever touched on, but we'll try to rein it in to some extent. But so the other day I was in a meetup with a guy, Jason Schulman, who I did a course with a while ago on non-dual Kabbalistic healing, which is a mouthful. But essentially it's based on non-duality, but the very kind of humanistic approach that involves personal healing.
That is my wife's phone.
Okay.
Sorry about that. It was just too loud to continue with.
That's okay. No problem.
As you can see, I'm sitting on the floor.
Oh, really? It doesn't look like it.
That's what makes it get awkward to get up.
That's true. Right. So somebody asked him, he opened it up for questions, and they said, Jason, after, all of the paths that you've been on, Zen Buddhism, Kabbalah, all sorts of different non-dual kind of traditions, how would you define non-duality today? And he just simply said, he took a moment and then he said, non-duality is intimacy with all things. And I thought that was very profound and very resonant, but also really represents, I think, a huge shift in how you live non-duality, whatever that means to you. And for me, whenever I've talked about my spirituality, usually the word non-duality has come up. So let's say non-dual spirituality. How do I live non-duality? So this idea that it's based on intimacy, I think is, for me, has been a pretty radical shift, considering that, the old way is kind of about the absence of you and of me, which kind of negates relationship to a large extent. And this turns that completely around. So I thought it would be interesting if we talked about I guess, living spiritually with a sense of that deeper intimacy, whether it's with other people or with nature or with the universe. I think that that for me is a really good launching point for me talking about my spirituality and what it's become for me now. So that's just a little preview, I guess.
That's fantastic. Do you want to start by talking about
Sure.
what spirituality has become for you now?
Definitely. So I mean, I think like really one of the first things that has changed is just how significant everything has become. Because for me in the past, a lot of the path was about things mattering less, I would say. Like it's just an illusion, or it's not really real, it's a dream, it's a passing show. And there was a lot to learn from that, and detaching from things that you're too attached to or too identified with that cause suffering. But of course, since that I went the extreme way of renunciation, I think for me now, what's so extraordinary is just how much things matter again, but they matter in a different way. It's not that I take everything personally and everything is so heavy and dramatic, but things are just simply significant because they exist, but also because they are God. So everything as an expression of God that's actually real, that's not exactly anymore for me, masking God, but is revealing God in every moment. I can look at, I was laughing the other day because I was watching the sunset from the beach in Tel Aviv and feeling, that great intimacy with the beauty of nature. And then I looked to my right and there was this pile of trash. And I felt the exact same thing, where I was seeing God in this pile of trash and feeling this great love and intimate connection with, these candy wrappers. And that to me really, I think, encapsulates that you sort of start to turn towards everything, whether it's something positive or something ugly, everything now, if you experience it as, a manifestation of God, then you do feel sort of that intimacy. And I'll say one other thing and then let you say something.
Sure.
When I think of intimacy, I remember, I forget who it was, some psychologist or spiritual teacher referred to intimacy as the three words, into me, see.
Mhm.
When you allow yourself to be intimate, you let someone look into you. So I think part of this experience of feeling intimate with my surroundings, whether it's people or a piece of trash or a tree, I'm able to see deeply into the thing itself, but really to see what someone else called precious isness. So I'm seeing beyond the surface of the thing, but really to the depth of it, which is just its essential being, just the fact that that it exists, and something in that is very softening and brings a lot of heart to it, and a lot of compassion and awe and beauty, but a kind that's not necessarily all positive. It's just that it's significant. So I'll stop there because I could ramble
Okay.
for a long
No,
time.
that's beautiful. That's beautifully said. Through our various conversations, well, it's been interesting to consider the things that have come up as we've both talked like this and also exchanged in emails or messages. But I have this very interesting experience around this conversation, uh, which is, on the one hand, I find myself feeling more like a non-dualist than I usually do. And on the other hand, I realize more and more that I'm not really a non-dualist at all. And that all depends on, the trick with these is it all depends on how you define what a non-dualist is. Who gets to define that?
Exactly.
Why am I not the model for non-dualism? So I don't, I guess I start to realize that in whatever sense I'm a non-dualist, it's not necessarily the sense that someone means when they talk about a non-dualist. which leads me to a question I'm going to want to ask you before we end, that I think is kind of, it was a big realization for me this morning. But in terms of how to live, so non-dualism to me basically amounts to the recognition that there's nothing wrong, that there's no problem, that there's a big emerging process of life. And I have some, I have my unique experience of that process that comes out of an identity. And I don't really know what's going on here. So I can't really make a judgment that something is wrong, because something being wrong means it should be some other way. And my experience of non-duality is that there can't be a should be, because the should be would be separate from what is, which would be dual. So this is the way it is, and it's the only way it could be. And so I experience life as non-problematic. And lots of things happen that I don't like, and lots of things happen that are painful and that cause me suffering, but it never feels like it shouldn't be that way. It just feels like it is that way. And I guess in terms of intimacy with what is, I just, what I aspire to is to embrace every moment with a completely undefended, vulnerable being, so that and to me, that's what intimacy is. There's no defense. There's no way in which you're holding something at bay or holding something separate. You're just completely open and vulnerable to what is, allowing yourself to feel whatever exists, and responding as naturally and spontaneously as possible. Just responding, in the way that in our best moments, when life's going our way and everything is great and we're feeling wonderful. I often use this story. It was a guy that I worked with and years ago, and he was just kind of a somewhat miserable human being. He was just unhappy, and he was never kind of easy and flowing and spontaneous. And then one day he came into work and he was like, "Hey, how you doing? Great day today." And I thought, wow, he's so open and like present, and I thought he must have fallen in love. And a few hours later, he told me he met someone, and he's really in love. And it's interesting how when you fall in love, that's just as an example, but when you do fall in love, that creates a kind of openness to your being. Yeah. Because it somehow, in our culture, for right or for wrong, it allows you to feel okay. It allows you to feel like everything's okay now. But some kind of extreme version of everything's okay now is how I see living non-duality. You realize that this is it. It couldn't be anywhere else because there is nowhere else. This shouldn't be some way else because there is no other way it could be except the way it is. And embracing it wholeheartedly and vulnerably and responding to it as completely as you can in the moment feels like the natural way to be.
So I have a lot to say.
Okay, good.
But for some reason, something happened to the screen and I am not seeing the chat box or myself. So I'm not sure.
If you go down to the bottom, do you see the place that says chat?
I don't. It seems like the whole sort of toolbar down there is gone. So I don't know what
if you go up to the right-hand side, do you see something in the right-hand corner that says view?
No, I don't see anything.
If you hover over it, nothing.
It's not a huge problem. So I don't want to, no, let's just
we'll just go with it. If something good happens in the chat, I'll tell you.
Okay, please do. I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so I'm glad you went here because it's something that I haven't really had much of a chance to talk about in person with somebody, which is actually a really big part of my challenge with, I guess, that philosophy. And I will try to understand
Yes.
more of what you mean by it. But what you just said was, I think you said that you take an extreme sort of approach to things being okay as they are, or there
Yes.
not being problems. And to me, that in its extreme, the way that I saw it manifested in sort of the non-dual communities I used to be a part of, was one of the biggest dangers, because it led a lot of people to say, well, it's perfect the way it is. You know, why do I need to be involved with, why should I care about societal repair? Why should I care about changing, you know, toxic relationship dynamics? And of course, these are the extreme sides. But when you said extreme, it made me think of the extreme. So I have to ask, how do you approach things like societal repair? How do you approach, you know, helping people ease suffering? Of course, we don't have to say, you know, the word problem also is problematic, I guess, because there's such a connotation to problem as something that's wrong. And I think you and I even talked about this idea of shifting from not seeing a problem as a problem,
Right.
seeing it maybe more as a challenge. But my question is, because you said, you know, the issue you have with saying things should be different, and I recognize that. But what if we were to say instead, I would like things to be different, because if they were different, there would be less suffering, or there would be more peace, or more societal unity. So I'm curious, how do you, from your perspective, engage or not engage with change or
Right.
repair?
So this is very interesting. Nina wrote a question. She said, we need to have preference or nothing would happen, which I think was a variation of what you're saying. Because when you say everything's perfect,
Related,
it
yeah.
sounds like you have no preference for anything. So I would say, and I've seen people like who kind of practiced in this way, right? Everything's perfect. So basically what they do is they adopt a delusional stance that oneness means that everything is okay the way it is, that in a way that kind of is insane. But that's because they haven't been extreme enough. You know, that's what I call is, I see that as not being extreme enough and everything is okay. Because if everything is okay, that means your absolute hatred of what's happening in this planet is okay. And if that's what you're feeling, and if you feel like you want to give up your house and your job and your money and go and give all of your time and energy to supporting, then you should do that, you know, and that's okay too. So people use that's okay. They don't go all the way. They go far enough so that they can negate the things they don't want and then say everything else is okay. It's just very self-serving. I don't know what, you know, it's serving some part of the self. So I always, you know, I never know what I'm going to feel in any given moment. You know, I just notice, you know, sometimes I walk down the street and I pass a homeless person and I just feel like walking right past them and not even looking at them. And sometimes I feel like giving them $20 and I don't know why that happens. So to me, I feel like if we are very sensitive to what's being called from us in the moment, we can respond to what's wanted now. And that means you don't know really what's going to happen next. You know, right now I feel like I want to teach and I want to create this online platform. But tomorrow, who knows? You know, maybe I just get called to battle climate change and I find myself heading off into a different life. It's happened before. So yeah, I guess that's the way that I would look at it is if you're feeling called to adopt the position that everything's okay, that has to mean everything. Right? Which includes all the things we don't like and includes all our responses to the things that we don't. It's all part of the same process. There can't be two. And your stance in everything is okay the way it is can't become something like everything's okay the way it is, except the things I don't like, which I can now ignore. Like, so to me, everything is okay the way it is. My preferred terminology for non-duality is radical inclusivity, which means absolutely everything has to be included and nothing whatsoever could ever be excluded, because any exclusion creates duality.
Right.
So anyway, that's my.
This is really great. I think the first thing I want to say, just because it makes me think of this quote, I'm really into quotes and I never know who the person was who said it, but it's everything is perfect and there's room for improvement. And I really like that. It's the both and, but there's also this idea, and when I'm in a certain state of consciousness, I recognize that it's when I can already tap into this sense of maybe deep okayness or even perfection, that somehow from there, I'm better able to take action in this strange sort of paradoxical way. But what I really want to focus on, because what triggers me most, just putting it out there, is when I hear messages that to me sound perhaps partial or are likely to be misinterpreted by, let's say, a newcomer to spirituality or spiritual philosophy. So when I hear you say, to me, non-duality is a radical sense of there not being problems or everything is okay, I immediately think of like myself and all these other people who hear that and then use that as a way to just kind of like make things feel like they don't matter or feel like they shouldn't have a problem, and then feel ashamed if they do feel a sense of a problem. And I know that's not what you mean, but I think it's a good time for me to ask how you feel about, because you and I talk a lot about like relanguaging things and how the way that you frame something or word it really changes the way that you experience it or relate to it. And so my whole thinking with, because I think a lot about how would I like teachers and, gurus, if we must still have gurus, how could they perhaps play a role in minimizing the chances that people do misinterpret non-dual teachings like that to become very nihilistic or overly passive and let bad things happen to themselves or other people? I guess, because you hear a lot, like the other day I was looking through some YouTube videos and saw, it said, the name of the video was "Nothing Will Save You." And it was one of those kind of typical, like, you're nothing, you're nobody. But I know that if I were to say to this person, why are you saying that nothing will save me? He would say, well, it's not really what I meant. What I meant was that this experience of, emptiness of God, which is nothing, is what will ultimately save you. But it's also really everything. But you didn't say that, and that's not what somebody who looked at that read. They saw a message that looked really sad and really nihilistic and kind of a downer, right? But I knew from my days when I read that, I would have laughed and been like, yeah, you're right. Nothing will save me. Nothing does matter, but nothing is everything. And it's God and it's the absolute and it's bliss. So I guess when I hear you say that, like part of me is like, I really want you to say that and put like a caveat. And of course, I'm not here to police you at all. But I think it's a good example of where, if you were, and I assume a lot of people here have maybe been in this community for a while, but I think it's helpful for me to share because I'm somebody who's been to that, more, let's say, extreme, not the good extreme side of these things, that for sometimes it can be helpful to know that, there are people that hear that and take away from it something that you really don't mean it to mean. So I'm curious how you think, if there's any need to like reframe it at all when teachers say things like that, just saying it and then a period stop,
Well, these are tricky. Rewordings are tricky because, as we've also talked about, if you add caveats to everything, you can sort of neutralize everything, and then everything becomes sort of nothing. And there's no power. This is something I think about a lot because my teacher was very extreme. Uh, and because he was so extreme, people experienced miracles. I think it was partly because he was so extreme. Now, he also created an enormous amount of damage. So my tendency is to go in the other direction. And I tend to be very unextreme. And I worry that because I'm so unextreme, I dilute the message and don't give people the benefit of the full power of of, of the message. So these are my open questions for myself. So, but of course, everything's always given in context. And so the context of this conversation with you, I'm going to take a harder, everything is okay extremist position, because that's kind of part of our dynamic and part of the dialogue that we're having. I never teach. I've really never taught about everything is perfect in life. I only ever teach that in meditation, that because I try not to teach anything about people's lives generally, because I don't really know how people should live. So beyond saying that, you should live wholeheartedly and, open and with a big heart and with generosity and with love, I don't really like to get into specifics about people's lives. And if people ask me questions about their jobs or their spouses or their relationships, I say, you should probably talk to someone who's better qualified to give you advice about these things than me. So yeah, and of course, if people get more deeply into what I teach and they read the books that I read, they'll see to me what's really important, more important even than what you say, is how you are and how you live. And I live a very engaged, wholehearted life in which I care about everything a lot. And I love people, and I care about the people that I work with. And I think that is a bigger part of what you're teaching than what because people can say anything, but what really transmits is what you're doing. So yeah, I mean, I don't think generally, except if people hear this or that, and that's it. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who's worked with me to any degree that would ever describe me as nihilistic. I've been described as a lot of things. Nihilistic is definitely not one. When I'm criticized by people, it's usually because they say I'm too attached. My biggest criticisms come from non-dualists who say I'm too attached to the world. Right. I very seldom have been criticized for being too detached.
And I certainly don't see you that way. I don't see you as nihilistic or any of those things. Like, I definitely see you as someone who leads by example from getting to know you. What just strikes me as so interesting is that, just the sentence itself that you said about taking that position, that's a radical sense that there's no problems, could have been, coming out of the mouth of, several of the,
sure,
hardcore negation nihilistic guys. But
could have been Ramesh Balsekar.
But actually, I'm so happy what you said towards the end was that when you think of that, you said that you teach that during meditation. And I think that really sheds more light on the heart of what you were saying, because in meditation, rather than saying, thoughts are unspiritual, feelings are unspiritual, we need to cleanse ourselves of those in meditation and just go straight to the emptiness. What you're saying to me is that everything in its imperfection is perfect, or the sadness that's here with me right now is sacred. And that type of meditation is actually what helped me heal from that very kind of anti-human perspective, where it's more of like a radical befriending of what you're feeling. So you're even befriending the part of you that can't befriend itself. And you're even surrendering to the part that doesn't want to surrender. That type of radical inclusion, I think, is probably the most profound and possibly most healing practice you can do. Is it easy? No, but there we are completely in alignment. So I'm glad that we got to that sort of that depth of it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly accurate. That when I say there's nothing wrong, I mean it at an existential level. And that boils down to me, there's nothing wrong with being alive. Even though a lot of it sucks and it hurts, it's better to be alive. It's better to exist and to have the opportunity to experience incarnation than not. And then on top of it, there's all kinds of ways in which it's better to experience incarnation this way versus that way. But at the fundamental level, we're all lucky to be here.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree with you. I'm sure there are people who would argue against it, but of course
there are.
I'm certainly not one of them. But it's cool because this all really does kind of tie into a lot of the things that I was thinking of before we talked, and with that intimacy, that sense of a deep intimacy and interconnection with other people. I mean, I know that you and I both know Tim Freak, and
Yes.
He talks a lot about this term unividual, where it's the experience of being, when I look at you, that I would see that you're another expression of the same sort of oneness or God or, universe that I am. So essentially we're one, but we're also two. And when you live from that to me, I think is a great example of feeling that kind of sacred intimacy. But something that keeps coming up in, retreats with Tim and in different meetups that we have, that when people actually make that shift into experiencing that sort of unividuality with others, whether it's just looking at people through the screen. One of the things that a lot of people share is that, wow, what I felt was this great sense of responsibility. I felt the sense that, I have a greater responsibility for my actions, for the little things that I do, because now that I feel so connected to other people and sense that real interconnection, what I do to myself, I'm actually doing to other people. And now that I feel a connection to people, I care more. So it seems like there's things that I now have to face that I would want to change in light of being, everybody kind of being so deeply interconnected like this. So in some way, there's a bit of a requirement that you open yourself to pain and to imperfection, and to feeling things that you might not want to feel, and really because you have to open your heart. And I think that in order to really experience that intimacy that I think of as non-dual, there is a sort of an agreement that you're making to have to open yourself, or kind of, as we were saying, like surrender to what we feel we can't surrender to. Like that radical inclusivity really comes in if you do want to live with that sense of deeper intimacy, because you can't do that if your heart's closed. And the moment
Absolutely.
that you radically open your heart, everything is going to flood in, stuff that you don't want to feel, whether it's yours or it's someone else's. But the gift of that is the gift of feeling radically alive and radically connected. So I think that it's this really deep kind of I don't want to say like negotiation that we make, but that there is, maybe you could say, a price you have to pay, or the one in you who wants to feel more numb, or the one in you who wants intimacy but doesn't want to be seen into, or the one who wants intimacy but doesn't want to bare their heart. That you can't really have both at the same time, I don't think. And I wonder, in your experience, if that rings true.
No, it rings absolutely true. In my I don't think of it usually in terms of like responsibility.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel to me like, it just feels unavoidable, so my experience is that I really love people, and when I do things that are hurtful to them, I feel really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And when I feel really bad, I want to make amends, and it just sort of happens, like one thing unfolds from the next. And I don't, and who knows, this could be personal thing, I certainly make lots of mistakes, but I don't tend to ever feel my heart closed. Um, if that valve either never existed or it was knocked off. Uh, when I make mistakes, I tend to make mistakes out of selfishness, loving myself too much and forgetting somebody else. And, but yeah, I just feel like the temptation, I think it's a good thing. I think everything we feel is good. This is where, what does that mean? That means we're on a journey, right? Where we want to evolve as a person, as a being, like an acorn wants to grow into a tree. And everything that happens is part of that process. So if I do something really shitty and then I feel really guilty, that's trying to change my physiology so that I won't tend to do that thing again, so that I will learn something, so that I will change as a result. And so when I feel things that I don't like anger or guilt or shame or fear, I tend to just think, oh, I wonder why this is helpful right now. Like, what am I learning here? How is this trying to change me? And sometimes I can kind of figure it out. Maybe I'm wrong, and sometimes I really have no idea. But so in terms of non-duality, whatever is my non-dual assumption is that it's all part of one evolving process, that the process is fundamentally good, and that whatever's happening is forwarding the process along in some way that I may or may not be able to know. So I don't have to hide from anything. It's all happening already. And look, and I always tell people, these are my beliefs. I have no idea if this is true. The only reason I teach it is because it's worked so well in my life. If I always tell people, because they'll say, how do you know this is true? And I'll say, I don't know if it's true. All I know is I'm so happy I can't not share it. It's working. So I just want everyone to be as happy as I feel. And I don't know if this will work for everybody. Like, I have no idea how this works. I just know what my experience is.
Yeah. I think it does work. And I think that probably the perspective that I come with is that for a lot of people, and not all of them, there's a lot of healing that one has to go through, especially depending on, the severity of traumas that they've been through. Everybody's been through shit. Everyone has traumas, but some people have ones that are more repressed or much more difficult to process, or that are
Absolutely.
really holding them back in life. So I think that, I love everything that you're saying. And, I obviously, as you said, that having an open heart isn't one of your biggest challenges, or one of your challenges, which is amazing. That would be the ideal. But I think what I come across more and more on my path is people who their spiritual path is often very much characterized by that sort of opening and closing of the heart to what's painful. And of course, when you close out the pain, you close out, the positive too. But so I think that the perspective that I bring in ties in non-dual spirituality with a very kind of deep psychological path of healing that also relates to psychotherapy. So I know that's not everybody's calling or everyone's interest, but it's also helpful talking about this, because it makes me realize more and more that my sort of I guess my calling and my mission really has to do with the two. Like, how can people use this type of spirituality to heal a closed heart, or to heal numbness, to get through trauma? And, I think that spiritual flourishing, you can only reach a certain point if you haven't really been able to face some of the deeper kind of blockages in yourself. So, I think, again, like, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, you've probably lived millions of lifetimes, because you've gotten, I think, in like your karmic, whatever it is that, the fact that you live with such an open heart, I think that serves as a wonderful example for people. and having that as sort of like a stronghold of a person who can always embody that is also really important and helpful to have. So it's great to see that in you.
Yeah, and that's, you know, it's very interesting, and it leads me actually to my realization from this morning that I wanted to ask you about, because
Okay.
you speak about the damage or the suffering, and I guess damage that the trauma of your non-dual path. And I'm not actually yet 100% sure what the non-dual path was that you were on. I think it was a variety of things. I don't think you ever had, and tell me if I'm wrong, a teacher that you worked with extensively over time in sort of close proximity, or maybe you did, I don't know.
Not long enough, I'll say that.
Okay. So it was more like you were literally damaged by the philosophy, essentially.
And I can say that I self-harmed, like there's
Sure.
a lot of times where I can say they did this to me, but it was the philosophy.
In the end, yes. But so, and I think I can't really relate to that myself. And then when I talk to you, I think, well, maybe I'm denying, because that also is something to be radically inclusive about, certain doubts. Maybe I'm just denying that I've been damaged by non-dual philosophy, and then I keep thinking, I wonder if I am. Because, maybe I have an investment in the 20 years I spent in a spiritual community, and I don't want to see it as fundamentally flawed. There'd be good reasons to deny it, especially since I teach it. But what I realized this morning was a very spontaneous realization. I realized Andrew didn't really teach non-duality. He taught evolutionary spirituality. Right. So non-duality was part of what he taught, but fundamentally he was talking about embodying the creative process of the universe as what he called your authentic self. Right. And your authentic self was your personality infused with the wisdom and consciousness of the universe, which is exactly what I teach. And sometimes I don't like to admit it because I'm kind of pissed with Andrew and et cetera. But then I have to say, fundamentally, I really do teach what I learned. But it wasn't really non-duality. And yet I think, well, but I know I was damaged. And then I realized this morning, I wasn't actually damaged by non-duality. I was damaged by Andrew's abuses of power.
Exactly.
I was actually damaged. And my, this kind of what at times can be a sort of naive open-heartedness was valuable and detrimental to me.
Totally.
Because I was so devoted and in love with and surrendered to Andrew. I was part of his security team. I was practicing jumping in front of people with guns, which I would have happily done if the opportunity, if circumstances, because I would go with him to teachings and I would sit in places where I could, because he did actually sometimes have detractors. But in the end, I just felt like his continued mission was more important than my physical safety, which, that's a questionable, stance, but it had nothing to do with non-duality. It had everything to do with my guru worship, which I know I have a much stronger allergic reaction to guru worship than I do to non-duality.
That's what I realized. And I think that's a big difference. Yeah.
I'm curious your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good topic because it does sound like, Andrew wasn't anti-personality. He wasn't anti-personal flourishing or, expressing personhood or actualization, but that is the opposite of the teachings that harmed me. And I think, and I sometimes wonder, like, because I know a lot of these teachers, like even people like Eckhart Tolle, like he lays the foundation for what becomes more and more anti-self teachings. But it's the ego bashing and it's the ultimate message of, you are nobody, you are nothing. The world is an illusion, nothing matters. There's nothing to do, there's nothing left to say. Just merge into the empty space of the absolute, period. And that's it. But a lot of like the brainwashing and the kind of the dogma is so like I want to just tell you a few names of books that I had read, and these
Sure,
were in
please.
my most sort of nihilistic. And I also have explained to you that like my situation is also confounded by the fact that I went in and out of severe depression, and I know that people on that path often approach it from a place of depression, and then their depression can also hijack it because the teachings can be twisted to become very nihilistic. But essentially, so there's one book that was called I Hope You Die Soon. And this was a book obviously about wanting, I hope that you die to the relative and, realize you don't exist. Another YouTube video, I forget the guy's name, it said, come die with me every Friday. We'll have a meditation where we die to the self, blah, blah, blah. But you see the way that it's positioned in all of this language and the radicalness of sort of the end of you. This is the end of the line for you. This is the end of your story. This is the erosion of you, that everything's focused on destruction. It's on negation. It's on dissolving without building anything back up. So I was basically radically annihilated. Honestly, I would say to some extent, even my soul. Like I went through something so extreme, and a lot of it was, we talked about this experience of, let's say, like luminous absorption or samadhi, however you want to call it. In those experiences, there is a dissolution, I would say.
Yeah.
You said sort of forgetting yourself. You could say it's losing yourself. You could say it's dying. But again, this is how language crafts all of this. So I was immersed in the language of death. Yours was probably more like the life of, the self that flourishes when it's combined with the absolute. But this was a very kind of dark twist on all of this. And so, I experienced these states of consciousness that, are often what's described on these very sort of traditional spiritual paths. But I got the benefits from it. But then because of all of the self-denial and the ego bashing and seeing all of these things as wrong rather than as perfectly imperfect, there was, a huge war within myself. So it was me fighting against myself. It was me trying to, look, whenever I wanted to express myself, it would be, the ego's need just to, get validation. It was just a radical sort of, I feel like I almost like scooped myself out of me, and you can see sometimes in these gurus' eyes, it's like eyes are the windows to the soul, and there is nobody home in there. I don't know if you've seen some of these people, but those are the type of people that I'm following. They don't laugh. If they do laugh, it's because they're saying, there's no teacher here and nobody showed up to hear a lesson from nobody. And you all laugh and it's really funny until it's not. But you know what I mean? It's like the people that you're even looking up to are people that have really stripped their personhood away in the name of spirituality. And
Absolutely.
being involved in that for years, it really does erode your sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot that goes along with it, with my own personal history. But I can say, I think the trauma was really this sense of like a soul loss, of like, I disappeared from my own life for quite a long time, to the point where I kind of felt, and I hear it from other people too, is like, you feel that you've kind of become like this ghost in your own life. And, it's very, very dark and very profound. And so there's obviously a healing path from that, and in coming back to oneself and revisioning what non-duality means, which is what we're talking about here. But I think after going through that, you become a bit more sensitive to the language and, and all of that. But I'm very aware that my path was very kind of specific, but yeah.
And everybody's path is, and my belief is, when we share, and I know you'll be sharing more and more as time goes on, and what you'll find is that people are attracted to you because your path is somehow resonant with theirs, and what you're offering is what they need. And I always, and that can change from for
Sure.
people from moment to moment. So sometimes people come into my work and it's the perfect thing for them, and they work with me for a few years, and then they've gotten what they needed and it's time to move on to someone else.
Yeah,
So
of course.
I always like to celebrate everyone's entrance and everyone's exit. Um, and because I don't know what path they're on. And I don't know, I have no idea that I'm somehow spiritually more advanced than anybody else. I don't know what my last life was like. you know, who knows? This is a pretty good one for me, but the last one, I might have been a scoundrel. One never knows.
Right.
So I just like to keep everything open. And all the years I was in spiritual community, it was over and over shown to me that you can't know anything. The most unlikely person turns out to be amazing. The
Yeah.
most likely person turns out to be a jerk. and everything in between, you just don't know what's going to happen for anybody. But that's very interesting. I think Andrew did teach a lot of that stuff, because he did come out of Punja and he did come out of New Advaita.
Yeah.
But it was always in the context that you want to, die to a certain limited personality that's acting like a straitjacket on who you really are, that wants to
That's
explode.
true.
So since that was always the context, at
Mhm.
least from the time that I met him, there wasn't this sense of like, oh, kill your ego and then just drift around as nobody.
Right.
That's
You
because
can see how that could potentially be pretty damaging to
sure.
thousands of people ingesting that message who are really upset with themselves and can't go on. And then that's the lesson.
It would be a terrible message for someone who already suffered from hating themselves to any degree, right? Because then you're just justifying their self-hatred and amplifying it and not leaving them anywhere to go.
Sure.
So this is what I felt when I started to teach. It's like a whole big pain in the butt to teach. Like, I didn't really want to do it. I had just seen Andrew fail, but I was prominent in the community and people wanted to continue the work. And I felt some responsibility for that. And one of my friends told me I could teach any way I wanted to. I didn't have to do it the way Andrew did. So I thought, okay, that's good. But what I realize is you can't just teach this and then let people walk away. You have to provide something for them to live into, right? You can't just take their old life away.
That's exactly right.
You need to at least point them in a direction, but preferably create opportunities, which is why I have a community, and I want to create a world that people can live in once they've died from, once they can no longer, at some point you can no longer live in the normal world. It just doesn't work for you anymore. So, and then I thought, oh, this whole internet thing is awesome, because now we can have friends all over the world that can relate to us. So yeah, I feel like you have to take responsibility for delivering people somewhere. You can't just deliver them nowhere and just leave them there.
That's where I think, like, you talk about being a constructivist, is that there's a deconstruction. There should then be a reconstruction of something. So I always thought it's like, these people are basically teaching you to burn down your house, and then you're homeless. And where do you go? It's like, burn down the house of self. Okay, right. Now I'm stranded and I'm disoriented, and where am I going to go tonight? So it's a very good point. And I think that's one of the main things that I would like to see change in some of these new age sort of insta enlightenment, self-help kind of stuff, loosely based on Advaita or whatever it is. That they need to offer resources, and they need to talk about integration, and they need to talk about the aftermath. It's not like self-dissolution, as you said, is not the end. And if it feels like the end, that's, that does happen sometimes. You need to have support. You need to know what to do next. And of course, that's not the same for everyone, but having no resources, you leave people often worse off than they came to you with. And I just think that there's something that's just so unsavory about that.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think, I'm going to tell you something that I was speaking with someone about the other day. So one of the members, Ariella, Cohen and her mom, Carmela, are in Canada, and they sometimes set up retreats for me there. And they've become very good friends. And Ariella just visited my wife and I for a few days, and she's a psychologist. And we were talking about the fact that I would love to write, except I don't know enough about it, but I would love someone to write a book about the psychology of awakening,
Mhm.
meaning what makes what are the psychological attitudes and principles that one needs to have healthily in place as a foundation for awakening, so that it can happen in a way that works, uh, and also what kind of psychological well-being is required in order to integrate what's discovered and be able to transform one's life. Because the easy thing about awakening, is realization. That takes a second, can happen to anybody. That's often what
Exactly.
people are teaching. Realization, pop, 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 and then what?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
The hard part is the transformation. The
Mhm.
hard part is, okay, now you wake up in a life that doesn't work. It's like, this is
Exactly.
the life I created when I was unawake is the one
Yep,
I wake up into. So
exactly.
something's got to happen there, and people need support, and it takes time.
It does take time.
And that's the real work. The realizing is easy. Uh,
Right.
Changing is hard.
Exactly. And it's the change needed to sustain that consciousness or to nurture
Absolutely.
it. So that's the lifelong challenge. So
So, and well, this has been fantastic.
it
And
has.
for everyone that's here, I had no intention of opening this up yet, because I knew Jessica and I had too much to talk about.
Sorry.
At some point, when we've talked about it all, we'll be able to have more open conversation. But I wanted us to have a chance to come to a deeper mutual understanding, which I think we did.
If anybody has a question about anything, feel free to message me.
That's right. Or, you can type it in the chat box right now if it's a burning
I
one.
can't see the chat box.
Oh, I can tell you.
Okay.
I've been watching. Someone just wrote about Dr. Keith Witt at Integral, about writing that. Yes, Keith is a good friend of mine, actually. When I taught in the Evolutionary Collective, he was part of it for a few years. Keith Witt is a psychotherapist in the integral world, and he's written about this relationship between psychology and awakening.
Great.
He's also the person whom I got the term, which I love, because spiritual bypassing is a thing, right? So he was working on a book, which I think he never finished, called Psychological Bypassing, which he said was what most of his patients were doing,
Yeah.
which is using the fact that they're in therapy as an excuse to avoid their problems.
There you go.
And that made me realize that bypassing, you could do it in a lot of different ways.
Oh yeah.
Spiritually is one of them. So I don't see any questions popping up here, Jessica, but we probably gave everyone
Lots to
so much
chew
to
on.
chew on. But yeah, Jessica's in the member circle. She can be found and messaged there, as can I, of course. And we'll do another one of these, Jessica. We'll set it up. And I just want to say, it's really a delight to talk to you.
You as well.
Got such well thought through positions.
Well, thank you.
And I really want to support you to bring your work out into the world, because I know there's lots of people that are going to need exactly the kind of support you can offer. So, we'll keep in touch about that.
Yeah, I have some thoughts to share on your last message. So we'll be
Okay,
in
good.
touch. But thank you, really, thank you.
Before we go, will you just, if you want, I want to point people to your blog.
Oh, sure. Yes,
You,
it's very not super developed yet, but there's a few
well,
stuff.
there was more up there than I thought after you told me it was not
Oh, okay.
developed. But she's posted blog posts, and you get a sense of where she's coming from and what she's wanting to share with people there.
Sure.
It's clearly a newer site, but it's worth visiting.
There's a great book list.
Oh, so what's your URL?
Oh, let me grab it.
But you don't have access to the chat, so I'm gonna have to type it in, I think.
Oh, okay. So Let's see if it's something easy. I think it is. It's actually, and this is probably going to change, it's navigate spiritual emergency.weebly.com.
Navigate spiritual emergency dot
Weebly,
we WEBL
WEEBLY.com. And there's the blog. And then if you go to resources and books, there's a super long book list of some really good gems.
There you go. So I just put it in the chat. You can copy that, everybody, and pull it out.
Thank you.
And great, Jessica, I'll be in touch and we'll set up
Yes,
another
you
time.
will. It was
But
lovely to see all of your faces. Thank you for being here.
fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and we'll do it again soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you all. Have a good holiday, everyone. Bye now.